just want to spend the next 5 minutes looking at the topic of the church. I want to try and answer the question, what is the church and why does it exist? You may or may not know, but the Bible was not written in English. It was written in a few different languages, and one of those languages is Greek. So I want to go look at the word that in the original language, Greek, that was used to describe the church, and that is the word ecclesia. I think it's really important to try and understand what the writers are referring to when we talk about the church. And the direct translation of ecclesia, which we call the church, is actually the called out ones. And I think that's very interesting because often in today's society, in today's church, we think about church and we look at, the buildings and we look at the services. But ultimately, that's not what the church is. The church isn't a building, the church isn't a service, but it's actually a group of people. I really like in the book of Acts, the author Luke, and I guess the people around that time, they didn't have a word for Christians at the time. They were just the people of the way, which I think is such a great way of describing us as Christians. We are people of the way. We are people who are committed to the ways of Jesus, and we are committed to being discipled by Christ. And I think that's such a great way to think about what is the church. The church ultimately is a group of people who are committed to being discipled by Jesus, who are committed to going on the way of Christ. In Acts chapter 2, verse 42 to 44, it says this, "And they, the church or the people of the way, they devoted themselves to the teaching of the apostles and to the fellowship and to the breaking of bread and prayers. And awe came upon every soul. There was many wonders and signs were being done amongst them. And all who believed were together, and they had all things in common." I think it's interesting here, especially that last part. It says that the early church, they had all things in common. This doesn't mean that they agreed on absolutely everything. It's not saying that they were perfect and they shared and everything was wonderful amongst them. But it meant that they had a common accord. It meant that they all agreed on what is the most important thing. And the most important thing for them was Jesus and being committed to learning more about him. So what then is the purpose of the church? Like, why does it exist? Why did someone, or where did it come from? Ultimately, it came from Jesus. Jesus first established the church through his disciples. But then why is it relevant? Why do we need it? I'd like to turn to 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9. And Peter says, "But you are a chosen race. You are a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness and into his marvelous light. Once you were not a people, but now you are God's people. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have mercy." See, Peter is writing to the early church and he's encouraging them that you are called out. That word that they use for church, ecclesia, means the called out ones. He's literally writing to the church. And he's saying that you have been called out so that we can bring glory to God. Ultimately, that's what the church is for. The Sunday services, the getting together are so important, but ultimately they all exist so that we can glorify our King of Kings. I think often we think Sunday mornings is the goal of church, that 2 hours we spend, but ultimately church is getting together on a Wednesday night for small group to eat food and read the word, to challenge each other, to grow with each other. It's not a building, it's not a service, it's a group of people committed with each other to following Christ. I hope that's an encouragement and a challenge to you, church. How can we be the church more so today?